The galaxy had hundreds of thousands of clone troopers at the height of the Clone Wars. On the day Palpatine issued Order 66, nearly every single one of them turned on their Jedi generals without hesitation. Thousands of soldiers, dozens of battlefronts, one transmitted signal, and the Republic's entire military became a killing instrument in under a minute. Except for a few. The number of documented clone troopers who resisted, hesitated, or outright refused Order 66 can be counted without running out of fingers. Their reasons were different. Their fates were different. But what connects them is something the Kaminoans and the Emperor never planned for. The stubborn, inconvenient fact of individual identity inside a system built to eliminate it entirely. To understand what made these clones exceptional, you have to understand what they were fighting against. Not just the Order, but the thing embedded in their own skulls since before they were born. Every clone trooper in the Grand Army of the Republic carried a behavioral modification biochip, implanted during the third stage of embryonic development on Kamino. The chip was positioned 90 degrees from the right orbital floor, below the parietal and temporal intersection, placed deep inside the brain, deliberately difficult to locate. Detecting it required a level 5 atomic brain scan. Without that scan, it was invisible. The Kaminoans told the Republic these chips were behavioral regulators, designed to suppress the aggressive tendencies clones inherited from their genetic template, Jango Fett. That was a cover story. The chips were triggers, dormant weapons waiting for a single command frequency. When Order 66 was transmitted, they activated the chip's override function, suppressing, by some analyses, moral reasoning and impulse control. The clones didn't choose to kill their Jedi. The choice was executed for them, at a neurological level, before they were ever given a name or a number. That's what makes the exceptions matter. Every soldier who broke from compliance, in any form, did so against a mechanism literally wired into their body from embryonic development. The scale of what resistance required wasn't spiritual or philosophical, it was biological. The first clone to fully understand that was someone who never got the chance to refuse Order 66 directly. He died trying to expose it. ARC Trooper 5's, designation CT-5555, belongs at the beginning of this story precisely because he doesn't fit the same category as the others. He wasn't a refusal. He was a discovery, and arguably the most consequential act of clone resistance ever recorded. It began with a malfunction at the Battle of Ringo Vinda. Clone Trooper Tup, CT-5385, experienced a premature chip activation during the fighting. Without warning, without any transmitted order, Tup walked up to Jedi General Tiplar mid-battle and shot her dead. He had no control over it. The chip had simply misfired years ahead of schedule. Tup was removed from the field for medical examination. Fives, his close friend and fellow 501st soldier, refused to accept the official explanation. He partnered with a medical droid designated AZI-3 and performed unauthorized brain surgery, going where no one was supposed to look, and uncovered what the Kaminoans had hidden inside every clone in the Grand Army of the Republic. Fives removed his own chip. Then he made the mistake that killed him. He requested a private audience with Chancellor Palpatine, the man who had designed the entire system, believing that getting the truth to the highest authority in the Republic would collapse the conspiracy. Palpatine turned the meeting into a precise trap. He manipulated Fives' behavior, introduced a substance that destabilized him, and had him reframed as a paranoid, drug-impaired soldier who had attacked the Chancellor himself. The truth Fives was carrying became evidence of his instability, rather than evidence of anything real. By the time he reached Rex with his warning, Imperial-grade hunters were already behind him. Commander Fox of the Coruscant Guard shot Fives with a lethal blaster bolt. Not a stun shot, a kill shot. And Fives died in Rex's arms, with the conspiracy still intact and the chips still sitting in the skulls of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. He knew everything. He had physical proof. He had found the exact mechanism by which Palpatine intended to destroy the Jedi Order, and he was dead within hours of trying to share it. Fives whispered a final warning to Rex before he died. The chips were real. The order was coming. Rex couldn't fully parse it in the moment. The framing around fives had been so thorough that even Rex couldn't be certain what was paranoia and what was truth. That uncertainty would haunt him. It would also, eventually, save his life. Captain Rex, designation CT-7567, is the most documented case of Order 66 refusal in Star Wars canon. He was captain of the 501st Legion, personal officer to Anakin Skywalker, and by the time of the Siege of Mandalore, he was operating alongside Ahsoka Tano in a joint effort to capture Maul. The 332nd Legion, his unit for that operation, was still in active combat when the signal came through. Rex hesitated. One split second. Enough that Ahsoka, force-sensitive and attuned to him after years of shared combat, could read it on his face. She saw the Rex she knew fighting against something overriding him, and that fraction of a second was all she needed to move. Every other clone around him converted completely and immediately. Rex had known Ahsoka since she was a Padawan. Their bond had been built over years of trust, shared danger, and mutual respect, and even a chip designed to override moral architecture couldn't fully suppress it in the first instant. It just couldn't hold against years of that. The hesitation didn't last. The chip reasserted, and Rex joined the pursuit. But the moment existed, and Ahsoka used it. She located his chip using force sensitivity, finding something microscopic inside his skull and guiding a surgical probe to the exact position to remove it. The procedure was successful. It left a visible scar on Rex's right temple, a mark visible in his subsequent appearances in Rebels. The scar is the physical record of what it cost to give him back his own mind. What Rex did immediately after the removal matters as much as anything else in this story. He was free. He could have run. Instead, he turned back into the 332nd Legion and fought through it alongside Ahsoka, carving an escape route through soldiers he had trained and commanded, people he had called brothers. The weight of that is difficult to overstate. He knew most of those men by name. He knew their histories, their habits, which ones had nightmares, which ones collected tokens from the planets they'd fought on. And he fought through them because the only other option was letting Ahsoka die. Their escape required a staged death. A crashed vessel on a desolate moon, Ahsoka's lightsabers placed in the wreckage. The wreckage convinced the Empire and Darth Vader that Ahsoka had died. Rex went underground, a clone soldier without a unit, without an identity the Empire recognized as legitimate, hunted by the same institution he'd built his entire life around serving. The other surviving chip removal cases, Commander Wolf and Clone Commando Gregor, arrived at similar hiding through very different routes. Wolf, designation CT-3636, commanded the Wolfpack Squad within the 104th Battalion, serving under Jedi General Plo Koon. When Order 66 was issued, Plo Koon was killed quickly. What Wolf actually did in the moment of Order 66 is genuinely unresolved in canon. The most direct statement on it comes from writer Henry Gilroy, who said at DragonCon in 2018 that Wolf likely followed Order 66 initially when it was issued. That's creator commentary, not a documented in-universe event, and the canon record doesn't go further than that attribution. What is confirmed is that Wolf removed his chip at some point after the order, and that the process left lasting damage. He developed persistent trauma and aggressive tendencies post-removal. His psychological trajectory after Order 66 was rougher than Rex's, and later on Selos, when the Ghost crew arrived during the early days of the Rebel Alliance, Wolf's first instinct was to contact the Empire about their presence. Rex talked him down. Removing the chip doesn't erase the fear that accumulates in the years after. Identity can survive the override and still carry the weight of what compliance cost. Gregor's path was stranger still. His designation was CC-557639. Long before Order 66, his war had already dismantled him in ways the chips didn't need to. He survived the catastrophic Battle of Serish, was stranded on the remote planet Abafar with no memory of who he was. He recovered himself eventually and escaped Abafar. In the Imperial era, he resurfaced in a degraded role, training TK troopers for the Empire, a Clone Wars veteran reduced to preparing replacements for the soldiers the Empire was phasing out. He didn't last in that position. Gregor grew dissatisfied quickly, signaled Rex for assistance, and was rescued by the Bad Batch. His chip was removed after that extraction. 3 men, 3 different paths through the catastrophe, all converging on the same anonymous location. A modified ATTE walker on the desert planet Selos, where Rex, Wolf, and Gregor built a life as fugitives in the years between the Empire's rise and the Rebellion's emergence. Old soldiers in an outdated machine, surviving by being difficult to locate. Clone Force 99, the Bad Batch, is the most complicated case in this entire story. The reason is simple. Not all of them resisted. Their response to Order 66 was a spectrum, and the darkest end of that spectrum is part of the record too. Clone Force 99 was a unit of genetically enhanced clones, each with a mutation that pushed a single capability past standard parameters. Hunter had heightened senses. Wrecker had physical strength far beyond baseline. Tech processed and analyzed information at speeds that approached something almost inhuman. Crosshair had marksmanship precision that had no real parallel in the Grand Army. Echo, the unit's 5th member, was different in kind rather than degree. A standard clone whose body had been extensively modified by the Techno Union, leaving him cybernetically altered in ways that went far deeper than any single enhancement. When Order 66 was transmitted, Clone Force 99 was in the field. Each member's response was different, and the in-universe explanation the Bad Batch series establishes is the mutations themselves. Standard clones had chips operating under designed parameters. The Bad Batch's genetic deviations created variations in chip sensitivity and activation thresholds, not by design, but by biological accident. Hunter, the squad's leader, showed partial hesitation when the order came through, enough to register a deviation from the standard chip response, though the specific mechanics behind that hesitation aren't detailed in the canon record. Echo had no functional response to the order at all. His Techno-Union modifications had disrupted the chip's mechanism at some structural level, rendering him incompatible with its function. His immunity wasn't psychological resistance. His body simply couldn't receive the signal the way an unmodified clone could. Tech's response is the least clearly defined of the group. Whether his enhanced cognitive architecture gave him the processing capacity to recognize and work against the compulsion, or whether his chip was simply less effective due to his mutation, isn't confirmed in the available canon record, and the characterization of his resistance as analytical may be fan analysis rather than a documented in-universe mechanism. Wrecker is the case that makes the central point most viscerally. He didn't immediately comply when Order 66 was issued, but his resistance wasn't a choice. His chip's activation was delayed, not disabled. Later in the Bad Batch's first season, the chip finally triggered. Wrecker, physically the most powerful member of the team, someone who had fought alongside these people through every engagement they'd survived, attacked his own squad mates without warning or control. It took direct intervention to stop him, and the chip was eventually removed. Wrecker's arc shows what the chip was more honestly than anything else in this story. It didn't care how strong you were. It didn't care who you loved. It would take you eventually. Then there's Crosshair, who is the shadow that runs underneath all of this. His chip didn't simply activate. It appears to have amplified something already present in him. He complied with Order 66 fully and embraced the Empire with what looked like genuine conviction. He executed Imperial orders. He hunted his former squad mates. And here is where his story becomes the darkest turn in the whole account. At some point during the Bad Batch series, Crosshair's chip was removed, confirmed in canon. His loyalty to the Empire post-removal was the product of his own free will. No chip, no compulsion, just a choice he made when no one was making it for him. That's the precise inverse of Rex. Where Rex's chip suppressed who he actually was, forcing Ahsoka to cut it out of him before he could be himself again, Crosshair's free self chose the Empire. The mutation that made him exceptional didn't give him moral distance from the Order. It gave him the precision to execute it better than anyone around him, and when the programming was gone, he didn't change course. The Bad Batch as a unit survived and eventually moved away from the Empire. But the defection wasn't unanimous and wasn't clean. Crosshair's arc is the reminder that biological contingency isn't conscience. It tilts probability, but when the chip is removed, the person underneath is responsible for what they do next. Kix, CT-6116, occupies a category entirely his own. He was a medic in the 501st Legion, which placed him inside the same unit as Rex, Fives, and all the turbulence of those final Clone Wars years. According to the Crimson Corsair comic, at some point before Order 66 was issued, Kix uncovered the inhibitor chip conspiracy. The Separatists found out and captured him, freezing him in stasis. Alive and silent was more tactically useful than dead and potentially discovered. He was sealed away specifically to prevent him from spreading what he knew about the chips. Kix never executed Order 66 because he was suspended when it happened. The Empire rose, lasted 2 decades, collapsed. The New Republic established itself. Kix remained frozen, the Clone Wars still unfinished from his perspective, until Sidon Ithano and his crew found him approximately 50 years after he was sealed. Kix woke into a galaxy where the Republic he had fought for was long gone. The Empire that replaced it was also gone, and everyone from his old life was either dead or elderly. His story is fully canon, published in the 2015 Journey to the Force Awakens collection, in a comic titled The Crimson Corsair and the Lost Treasure of Count Dooku. Kix is one of the stranger corners of the expanded universe, but he's confirmed, and his version of resistance is the most passive possible. He never had the chance to comply or refuse, but the reason he didn't was that he had already put himself in the way of the truth and paid for it. What is it that actually separates these soldiers from the hundreds of thousands who complied without any hesitation at all? The evidence points at several intersecting factors. Chip removal is the most direct. Biological incompatibility, Echo's case, and the Bad Batch's mutations, comes at it from a different angle entirely. And then there's the bond question, which is subtler but present in Rex's hesitation and in the trajectory of the ARC and Commando programs generally. The soldiers in this story weren't standard line troopers executing routine orders from a rotating roster of commanders. ARC troopers, clone commandos, units like the Bad Batch, these roles demanded operational independence, individual decision-making, and sustained relationships with specific Jedi over extended deployments. That autonomy built something, a stronger sense of self, a more complex internal architecture of loyalty and identity. The longer a clone had worked with a Jedi as an actual partner rather than a superior officer, the harder it was for the chip to fully suppress what that relationship had constructed. None of that was engineered in. It grew from experience, from years of war, from clones who were asked to think and adapt and grieve and decide, from Jedi who treated them as individuals and got individuality back in return. The Kaminoans built interchangeable soldiers. The wars made people. And people, as it turns out, are the one thing a biochip can delay but can't entirely become. The empire that rose from Order 66 inherited a military built on the assumption of total uniformity. The assumption was always wrong. Rex had known it longer than anyone would admit. Fives had died proving it. The Bad Batch had made it visible by existing at all. Kix had been frozen to keep it from becoming public knowledge. The cracks in the Grand Army of the Republic weren't engineered into the design. They accumulated, in the spaces between soldiers and Jedi and years of fighting, until the chip's architecture simply couldn't hold against them completely. That's what makes these few worth knowing. Not that they were special by design, or born different, or chosen by anything. They became different, through the accumulation of bond and identity, and whatever stubborn core of selfhood survives even embryonic stage manipulation. The Empire needed them to be the same. They weren't. And eventually, that small, unchosen difference mattered more than all the hundreds of thousands who were. Subscribe for more stories like this one.